Hello, Salem, and welcome to CC Media Presents Our Community Matters. I'm your host, Evan Remington. Today in the city of Salem, thousands of residents interact with city services and infrastructure. We drive on the roads, walk on sidewalks, and access Salem's beautiful parks. We have conversations about affordable housing, bridges, aging facilities, and the need for expanding many city services. But how do we address so many critical improvements of city streets, safety measures, and livability without increasing property tax rates? On today's show, we'll take a look at ballot measure 24474, also known as the Salem Community Infrastructure Bond. The City of Salem's $300 million proposal for Salem voters to decide in the upcoming November election. Joining us in the studio to provide some perspective on this is Mayor-elect Chris Hoy and CEO Salem Chamber of Commerce Tom Hoffert. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
So, Chris, help me understand, what's the history of infrastructure bonds in Salem? Has this type of bond been utilized before?
It has. We've used it a number of times over the years. As back in 2008, we funded a streets and bridges bond that did a lot of upgrades to our roads, did a lot of repair, and really kind of gave a great infusion into our infrastructure and improved it. We built our police facility with an infrastructure bond. We seismically retrofitted the library with a bond. And so, yeah, we have a strong history in Salem of this type of work, and it's really what we need in order to be able to do those major capital improvements in the city.
Okay. So, Tom, how does a bond even work?
Yeah, bonding is something used by many municipalities across the country. When you look at needing to raise dollars, essentially you are debt financing through the voters saying, we will provide you this income based on our property values into a bucket that the city then takes and a loan from in the open market. We're very fortunate in the city of Salem that our bond rating, our credit rating is incredibly high. That is through many years of stewardship of community dollars. And we're a very attractive municipality to loan to for that reason. So a bonding program in this instance would be a 10-year process where you would take three separate, about $100 million increments and put them into the market, essentially borrow from lending sources on the market based on the promise of the voters of Salem paying their property taxes back to the city of Salem. So it becomes an incremental bonding process that occurs over 10 years that allows dollars to come in at different stages to then enact the different projects that the city is committed to the voters to take on.
Okay, thank you for that detail. I appreciate that. So a brief overview of the categories of the 6 projects that are proposed in the measure. Can you share some of the key components with each? And I guess starting with streets and sidewalks, there's $157 million allocated for that.
Sure. So I think that kind of the biggest project that we're doing is we're building Marine Drive, which is a street over in West Salem that runs parallel to Wallace Road. And it's kind of situated between Wallace Road and Wallace Marine Park. It's going to give some great local access from all of those apartments and residents there in West Salem, all access to the grocery store, to the post office, all those things, without having to access Wallace Road. So it's really hopefully going to provide some congestion relief over in West Salem, which is really, really important. It's going to do some urban upgrades on several of our streets. Fisher Road out in Northeast Salem, Davis Road out in far South Salem, Pringle Road in South Salem. It's going to upgrade those roads, which right now are pretty much just pavement, and then on each side of the road you see ditches or some. It's not great for walking, for biking. It's not that fantastic for driving. And so this will upgrade those. It'll give them sidewalks. It'll give them bike lanes, street lights. It'll do stormwater infrastructure to help the roads drain properly and retain that stormwater and deal with it. So we're going to upgrade those really important streets in Salem as well. It's also going to do things like just repair pavement. You know, in a lot of places in town you see, wow, this road needs some work. It's going to repair a lot of that pavement that really is in desperate need of some improvement. It's going to help with the Union Street Bikeway. Right now we have a series of like kind of a patchwork of bike infrastructure. This is going to connect those. So from the new Marine Drive, we're going to build a path, a walking biking path over to the Union Street Bridge, which will also connect to the Union Street Bikeway. We'll finish that off. And so you'll be able to connect all the way from West Salem to the 12th Street Promenade. So we'll actually have a system where you can walk and bike. You can get over to Riverfront Park and then over to Minto Brown via the bridge. And it'll be a really nice way to ride your bike when you're not on a street necessarily. I think that's the number one thing we hear about folks who would like to be able to ride and walk more, is that they're not feeling like they want to be out, amongst the traffic. And so this is going to be a much better way to do that. It'll also do some sidewalk improvement. As a city councilor, the number one thing I hear from voters in my neighborhood, and I know my colleagues hear it in their neighborhoods too, is we need sidewalks improved. We have a lot of really aging sidewalks where trees have really destroyed some of the sidewalks. This is going to give us a bunch of money to help fix those. It's also going to give us some money for areas of town where through annexation and development, sidewalks have never been connected. We'll have entire patches where you go along, there's sidewalk, and then nothing, and then sidewalk. This will actually give us the opportunity to connect some of those where people will be able to walk and ride their bike maybe or whatever in a safe manner, which currently is really challenging in certain areas. So there's really a lot of things it's going to do in terms of upgrading our roads and our streets. We actually have 3 bridges in the city that we have weight restrictions on currently. And this is going to repair those bridges. Like our fire trucks can't drive across them. Big trucks can't drive across them because they're just in disrepair and they just can't handle the weight. So this will actually help that as well. So folks can have better response times in those neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. And so with the sidewalks and street repairs, are those focused in kind of main thoroughfares? Was there thought put into spreading the wealth, I guess, if you will, across our city?
We worked really hard. We had a really robust community engagement process. All the city councilors were involved, very heavily involved in the decisions on where those projects would be. And as you know, we represent geographic areas of the city. So believe me, every city councilor was in there saying, my area needs this, my area. So we did a really good job of making sure that every part of the city is represented in this bond package, for sure.
And so you mentioned the fire engines and as it pertains to going over the bridges, but there's $40 million, I believe, for 2 new fire stations, fire engines, and equipment upgrades. Is that right?
Yes. We need to replace our fire fleet. Our trucks are 14 years old, and they've got hundreds of thousands of miles on them, and they're just getting really costly to repair at this point. They're really no longer serviceable. So this will replace that fleet and give us some modern equipment so we're sure that we're able to respond to calls as needed. It'll also build 2 new fire stations. Right now we have response time challenges in a couple of key areas of town. There's been a lot of building out in Northeast Salem, up on Kale and out in that area. So it would relocate one of our stations that's currently on the Chemeketa campus. It would relocate that over to Portland Road, so all that staff would transfer over to that other station. And then it also would build a fire station out in the Mill Creek area. There's a lot of stuff happening out there, a lot of industrial, a lot of business construction, and there's going to be a lot of housing going up out there as well. And so this will really help with response times out in the Mill Creek area.
Great, thank you. And maybe the most fun topic, the park upgrades. Can you speak to that? What can we expect?
This one's really exciting because we just don't ever get a big infusion of cash for parks in Salem. It's just not how our system is kind of set up. So this is going to put in new pickleball courts, and it's going to fix some tennis courts. It's finally going to pave the dog park parking lot at Minto Brown, which is one of those, I mean, if you use the dog park at Minto Brown, you know why that's a really big deal, because that thing the holes that can develop in that in the winter, you can't even climb out of them half the time. They're so deep. So it's really exciting. It's going to replace some aging bathrooms. It's going to build new restrooms in parks that have never had them. It's going to replace a lot of the playground equipment that's super old and it just frankly doesn't work anymore. It's going to do all sorts of things. Build a lot of trails and paths in our park that don't exist. And we're going to get 2 new dog parks, including one at Gear Park, which is really important for the east side of town. We don't really have a dog park in that area, and so this is it's really needed. For instance, from my house to the nearest dog park is 9 miles. I mean, that's, I don't typically go to the dog park very often because it's 9 miles away.
Right.
So residents in my area out in East Salem are really excited about having a dog park.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what about other sites for branch libraries? I know we've got one in West Salem. Is there others planned?
We do contemplate purchasing property for 2 new branch libraries. We have the main library downtown, and we have a branch library in West Salem. What this would do is it would buy property, so in the future we could develop branch libraries in South Salem and East Salem, and it would be in a mixed-use type of facility where we would have a library on the ground floor and then affordable housing above that. We think it'd be a great resource for the community. We're even talking to Chariots about the possibility of locating one of those at their new transit center out in South Salem, which would be, I think, an amazing opportunity if we had a branch library and affordable housing right at near that transit center. I think that would be really a wonderful asset for the community. So
yeah, absolutely. You mentioned affordable housing. I think that's definitely something that's kind of top of mind for a lot of Salem residents. Can you speak more to the plans overall for affordable housing?
Sure. We also have which is a really exciting opportunity fund in this. We have $10 million and basically we contemplate public-private partnerships. Right now, when builders want to build affordable housing, it's very difficult because it doesn't pencil out, because the rents that they can charge aren't enough to make the project work. And so typically you see affordable housing projects only in places where the city or the urban renewal agency can help incentivize through property tax abatement and other things, which we do whenever possible. But those are geographically restricted to you have to be located within one of those urban renewal areas or in the core of the downtown, we have another program called the MUTIP, which allows us to abate taxes in the core. But this would give us an opportunity to do it anywhere in the city. We could help subsidize affordable housing. We enter into a contract. It's a binding agreement with the builder. We would provide the incentive, and then they would provide a certain percentage of the units within that development as affordable for a certain number of years. So it's a really exciting opportunity to increase our housing stock at an affordable level, and have additional housing as well, because we need housing at all levels of the affordability scale, really.
Okay, thank you. What about earthquake safety? We keep talking about Cascadia, the big one that we know is not if but when. What's in the bond for that?
Yeah, the voters were wonderful and passed a bond a few years ago to seismically retrofit the library, and now it's time to do the civic center. We have lots of employees who work there. The public is there. If we have a big one during the day, people will perish currently. I mean, it's just the reality of the way that structure was built, and we need to seismically retrofit that for our employee safety, for the public safety. So this would seismically retrofit the civic center and make it so people could get out alive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. These things sound like they cover a large scope and that they're very important. But Tom, representing the business community in the room, how does the business community feel about this? How do we benefit from it? What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, this is a chance for our community to say we believe in Salem's trajectory. We have an emerging leaders group that continues to choose Salem. For many years, we had young people exiting our high school ecosystem and wanting to be out of our community. Now we are becoming a community that people want to either stay in or look to move to and be a part of due to the flourishing downtown scene and the amenities and the communal focus. So from a small business perspective, as we look at the bonding package, we're focused on livability, things that make it easier for our small businesses to see potentials for growth. And so starting with conductivity as a city. By no means is this bond going to fix every sidewalk, every divot in a road that you see in the lake. But we need our key arterials and some interconnectedness of our sidewalk system and biking system and the roadways to better connect and allow for transportation and the movement of humans to occur. There are great opportunities that come with this for our local business community in a bonding process as well. The selection and use of local companies is a very attractive and thing that the Salem Chamber strongly advocates for. As a community, we need to make a choice and say we believe that Salem ought to be better in 10 years than it is today. And by making a choice to say no to a bond like this, you're essentially saying to your residents and your neighbors, hey, I believe Salem's just fine as it is, and we shouldn't be doing any sort of infrastructure improvements. We don't believe that to be the case. We believe that this is a responsible way to go to our voting constituents and ask for permission to invest in our city so it can be better in 10 years than you see it today. And our organization stands behind thought processes and strategies like that to ensure the ecosystem is healthy, for our small businesses to thrive, for paychecks to be cut, and for Salem residents to know this city is a priority. And they should take a lot of pride in being a resident and spending not just their resources, time, and talent in the city, but telling future generations, this is a place that you are not only welcome, but we want you to be here. We want you to understand the trajectory of our city, and you're part of something really, really special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, considering all of the different people that we have in our city, can you speak to what the process was as far as the need assessment, and I mean, how were the projects selected?
Sure, that's a great question. The staff went out to every neighborhood association in the entire city. We went to business groups, any community group who would have us, and got feedback. We had surveys on our website. We did telephone surveys, and city councilors talked to, of course, to constituents as well. We had an infrastructure committee that was tasked with developing a recommendation for city council, and they considered all of that input and gave additional input, in fact, and then sort of winnowed that down to what we thought were the top priority projects, made a recommendation to the city council, and then we held a public hearing where the community had another opportunity to give input and feedback on the list and tell us what they thought we got right, maybe what we needed to do better with, and we developed a final list, and then city council approved it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any things that didn't make it to this list that maybe are kicked down the road and on the next one?
So many things. So many things. We have a huge need for infrastructure, but we also were really cognizant of keeping that tax rate flat. Mm-hmm. So we were committed to not going over $300 million. We knew that through the staging over 10 years that we could keep our tax rate flat if we kept it at that $300 million limit, excuse me. And so we were very draconian with our cuts. There was nothing, we were not going to go over that limit no matter what we did. And so we literally just sat through meeting after meeting where we just had to agonize, it was agonizing because you're cutting projects that are so important, but we just couldn't fund them all at the end of the day. One bit of good news is we during this whole process, we applied for a federal grant for one of our major projects out in McGilchrist. That's a project we've been trying to get built for so many years, and we were denied 6 times by the federal government for that project, and we thought, we have no chance to do this, but we're going to apply one more time. On our 7th application, we were approved, and we're so happy to our U.S. Senators Wyden and Merkley for getting that. I think they really got it across the finish line. So we were able to take that project out of the bond list and add back one of our cuts. So which it was really really exciting to be able to do that, and we're going to get McGilchrist, but we don't have to pay for it out of the bond. So it's a really good thing.
Okay, great. That's an interesting story. I appreciate that. So you said that you had to keep it to $300 million, but how is it possible that a project of this magnitude isn't going to increase the property tax rate?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because that's what's so critical for folks. We're in a time, especially now, where people can't afford more. Maybe they can keep paying what they're paying, but they really don't want to go with more. And so we were committed to that. And so how we'll do that is, as existing bonds roll off of the tax rolls, like the police facility, the library seismic retrofit, as those types of bonds roll off, as we pay them off, and we no longer owe on them, we'll roll on portions of this. That's why we're doing it over 10 years, and we're doing it in $100 million increments. Staff has done an amazing job of really staging these out and figuring out which things could go first, and as things roll off, we'll roll this on. The truth of the matter is we don't really have the capacity to deliver on $300 million worth of projects all at once anyway, so it really, this locks City Council in for the next 10 years to these projects that we've committed to, and it gives the residents of Salem a guarantee on projects that are going to be happening, and it gives the council the assurance to know that we have a number of projects over the next 10 years that are in the pipeline with funding. We come up with all sorts of projects that we want to do. It's the funding part that's the key. And so this is really going to lock that in for us, and we're going to be able to do some great improvements over the next 10 years.
Right. So do you know off the top of your head, I mean, when does the first project roll off and the first new funds come in?
As soon as this thing gets passed, the staff will go to work for going to market with those bonds, and it'll be very quick that we'll be getting those projects out the door. Some of them are already designed and ready to go. Others are going to take design work, and so that will happen. But we have many projects that are ready to go. And for instance, one of the first things that we have to do is buy the new fire fleet. That's a really critical. That's a critical purchase. But with our supply chain issues right now, we're probably talking about 2 years from the day we place the order till the time we get our new fire truck. So that'll be probably the first thing we do, so we can get that in the pipeline and get those trucks on the way.
Okay, good. Yeah, that rolls right into kind of the next question that I had is, over the 10-year period, what are the next steps? Like what happens first, or how do you view that rolling out?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated to explain, but we have pieces of all parts of the bond set to roll out over a 10-year period. There'll be parks projects and road projects and the fire projects that'll roll out up front, and then other things will come later in the bond as other projects are finished up. So we have that all kind of outlined. For folks, I'd be happy to chat with people about that. But it's a lot to go into right here. But we have it staged over 10 years in a way that the staff can actually manage those projects, and a way that it'll still keep within our budget.
Right, got it. I mean, those things are so exciting, really, for Salem. It's exciting to hear just the possibilities. What happens if it doesn't pass?
Well, we don't want to think about that too much or talk about it too much. But if it doesn't, and I really hope it does, because this is really an investment in our community. But if it doesn't, we'll take a step back. The police facility didn't pass the first time. We retooled and came back. And that's what we'll do. Again, we'll have to decide what is just the absolute top priorities. We'll figure that out, and that'll be a city council decision. So that's why I can't say what will happen, because there are 9 members of the city council, and it'll be whatever the majority decides. But I'm guessing that it'll involve a reprioritization and a retooling and coming back with some smaller ask.
Okay. Is there any opposition to this?
There is no organized opposition that we're aware of at all. And in fact, when Tom and I have been out talking with groups, and we've been out a lot, we have not had opposition whatsoever. In fact, this is really, the people who are supporting this, it's a broad spectrum. I mean, the Salem Chamber, the home builders, the entire city council unanimously as individuals, we've all endorsed it. And 350 Salem, which is a local environmental group. So it's really kind of this isn't really a political question. This is a community investment question, and it's really across the board. It's not uncommon when we speak about this to have every person in the room want a lawn sign, or to know how they can get the word out and to know more about it because they're so supportive of it.
So you talked about, going on tour and having these conversations. Can you talk more specifically about the outreach efforts for the bond measure and the feedback that you've received?
Yeah, we have, myself and Mayor-elect Hoy, along with the support of city staff, and I'm going to circle back to that support of city staff in a moment. We've been in front of your Rotary groups. We have a city club coming up. We have your neighborhood associations. We've been in front of the business groups. We want to present the platform and educate voters. But I want to circle back to a key component of that, and that is the voters themselves. We have until October 18th to have voters register, but we need voter participation. Our city, our residents typically show up in voting blocks of about between as low as 17% and up into the high 40s on a rare occasion. We need our voters to be engaged, educated, and then on November 8th, we've got to go share our voice on what this community believes. There is so much attraction to the gubernatorial campaigns, the various personality campaigns. But hidden in that is a key opportunity for us to invest in this community. So voters are going to be asked in Salem to make a choice of Salem's trajectory, and we're going to invite them to invest in the future. Another interesting part of this, Evan, is imagine going out for a campaign for the city, and yet not one city employee can advocate for the bond measure. So it takes individuals like Mayor-elect Hoy and other leaders in our community from the philanthropic space, nonprofit space, business community, and others to step forward and carry the water to the finish line. Mm-hmm. We can't have our staff advocating, and so there's a large potential workforce. You'd think, why isn't the city staff out advocating for their own bond measure? Mm-hmm. Well, it's not allowable. And so community leaders need to step forward and say, we believe in the trajectory of the city. We're going to motivate and deploy our assets and encourage whether it's a membership organization, whether it's a peer group, to be involved, to be educated, but most importantly, we need people to vote. As a community, we need to lift the water and make sure all of our community leaders and individuals, residents, take advantage of the voting process. Mm-hmm. And so this is a very unique campaign. It does not have city staff out there running it, but rather a group of volunteers, of which none of us are being paid to do this. It's something that we believe in within our organizations and as leaders ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that requires a community ask and a community lift in the end.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what are the key points that voters should know going into the election?
This will not increase your tax rate. That's the number one thing that people need to know. Mm-hmm. This bond measure keeps your tax rate flat where it is today. It's a community-wide investment. Every part of our community is going to receive benefit from this, whether it's the roads, the parks, fire departments, you name it. This reaches every corner of Salem, and it's such an important ask. And it's really critical that when you're voting that you don't just look at maybe the top one or two races, that you actually turn it over, because things like this are usually on the back page, right? Yeah. And sometimes people forget, or they don't think about it, or think that those things aren't important. This is critical. This is critical for the next 10 years and way beyond that for an investment in Salem.
When we look at how we go to market with any sort of community bond package, right away, who's for, who's against? And Chris hit it on the head. There's no identified opposition to this. Now, a taxpayer is well within their right to say, I want to slash my taxes, and so I'm going to vote no. I understand that perspective, but I want to ask voters to look a little deeper and say, where do I need my community to be? As a homeowner, you can't, if you have a giant pothole in front of your house on the street, nowhere are you allowed to go fill that pothole. So we have a municipality that is our partner to make sure our streets, sidewalks, and bikeways are interconnected. Mm-hmm. That is the role of city government, is to provide those infrastructure advantages to our community. So if not them, who? We need to count on our city to be able to do great contract work with local bidders, I hope, and make sure that we have the opportunity to see Salem's trajectory continue to be on a very positive course. And we're going to ask for voters to make sure to cast that ballot and on November 8th, be a part of the participatory process of voting.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom and Mayor-elect Chris Hoy. Appreciate your time. The November 8th election is right around the corner. Our political leaders only know our priorities when we tell them what's important to us. Informed voting is our responsibility. We hope we were able to provide some new information to you today, and we encourage you to make your voice heard at the polls. For more information on Measure 24-474, visit the City of Salem website at cityofsalem.net and search Salem Community Infrastructure Bond. Thank you for joining us, and remember, our community matters. We'll see you next time.